Okay, today you're going to learn how to make a choker. I'm using the same technique. You can make breastplates, bracelets, and other decorative items that you might want to add on to some of your leather work. What you'll need is leather. You'll need to cut your squares. Then you'll need to punch 4 holes. I'm doing a 4. You can do more depending on how thick you would do it. Bracelets you can do 2 to 3. And just keep on. So how you start, I'm using beads that I did in a previous video. These are the antique ones. These are the cranberry juice dyed ones. So I've already started, just to speed up the video just slightly. I've already started. You just go through your top hole, put a bead on, put your spacer, bead, spacer, bead, and this is the pattern that you continue with. I'm going to do a solid red center in my bead here. This keeps you on your toes because you have to, when you're going the opposite way, you're going to be reversing the patterns. So you just have to concentrate a little bit, and if you don't want to do just remember that you have to keep the spacers. That's it's easy enough to do. I've done lots of these and I still do them repeatedly. Have to remember to keep your spacers. Don't worry about the thickness of the spacers. All that gets trimmed up. At a later time. When you're finished and done tying, then you can trim the excess off. So then you go through your top bead. Make sure you get it the right way. You'll go through your top bead. Through your top, then through your next hole. And this is either you can keep the same pattern or you can reverse it. I'm going to reverse my 2 centers, so my 2 centers will be the same. So again, these bone beads were dyed. One was with tea, one with cranberry. I use a needle just to help me out. You don't necessarily need a needle. And I'm going to keep the very center red. So I'm deliberately doing this where in some cases that would have been a mistake, but I'm doing this deliberately. So I want red in the center. Oops, I did it to myself again. This is also what comes in handy using the needle. Well, sometimes it comes in handy, but bent the needle slightly on that one. Bent it back. It's okay to make mistakes. It's fairly forgiving. You can always fix them up. Don't overly worry about the looseness right now. That can all be tightened up. All be tightened up later. Yeah, I guess I would recommend for beginners not to do patterns. It is time consuming, and if you get frustrated easy, this does take some commitment. And the center one's going to be the same. It'll start to twist on you, but just straighten it out so you can keep your patterns the same. And sometimes when you're done, you don't like what they look like, so and the interesting thing about chokers is that chokers weren't really made as fashion design. It did serve a purpose back in the days. It was primarily used to prevent somebody from sneaking up behind you and cutting your throat. The bone beads had a bit of protection. It was basically armor that you'd wear. So you'd make this, you'd have your breastplate. There's that bone bead had a defect. You can always fix them at another later time if you have extras. You don't need this big a needle either. I've just made it. I'm just using this big to make it easier on myself. You can even do a belt this way. a decorative belt. The main thing is to give it a try. Sometimes even mistakes turn out to be really nice looking. Now if you don't have enough bone beads, what you could have done right from the beginning is add beads with your bone beads. And that way it would have spaced it out more. This is where you cut your end. This is where you tie the two, but don't tie it too much. This is also where you pull out all the extra tension. And this gets folded over and sewn on itself. I probably won't show you guys that, but all you do is you fold over and you take another strip. There's multiple ways to do this, but I'll just show you with a little scrap here. And your tie tail is much longer than this, of course. Then that would be sewed in there. This is cut, so it hides itself. But you'd curve these ends. You'd sew down through, and that would be a tie-in. Now as for these sections, you just lay it on your finger and you trim them down. So they get use your finger as a guide. Be very careful not to cut yourself. Don't cut the holes. Always watch for the holes. Take your time at this. Make sure you do not cut those holes, or you have to take this whole thing apart again. And that gets frustrating. And I've done it numerous times. It does happen. I said I wasn't going to show you a way. I won't show you the sewing way. There's another way that you can do this too. I'll show you that way. You guys decide whether you're going to sew it. If you're going to sew it, you would just simply take it, you trim it off just like you did the other end. And you'd round it. You'd round them. Get them relatively even to each other. There's two ways to proceed this way. I will make, basically you can fold, then you add your thing in here, and during your sew at the top, you would sew in your spacer or your tie string. You want enough tie string where it can go to the back of the neck. Everybody knows how to sew, I would hope. Make them roughly the same length. Yeah. Now again, if you want to really clean this up, you'd sew all the way around. We're not going to worry about that. We're just going to make a couple holes in this. Then you tie this. The good thing about using artificial sinew is that it does melt. So these little ends, you just melt them down. Just hold the lighter up to it or some source of heat. I do recommend sewing here, but I won't do that for time's sake at the moment. I try to keep my videos roughly a similar length because my internet is unpredictable and I know how long it takes to download. And unfortunately, Unfortunately, I won't name what company I'm with, but they're not the best. But they're, unfortunately, where I live, they're the only choice I got. And again, you just melt it. And there you go. Clean that off. Well, I hope everybody got the basic knowledge, or basic knowledge on how to do this. Chokers are done the same way, as like this. Bracelets, no matter what strand, is pretty much done the same way. Breastplates are done the same way. They're all the exact same. So, enjoy.